what makes a website good is a website is good from a user's perspective if it helps that user achieve their goals. All right? It doesn't have anything to do with fancy colors or animations or videos or so on. The three examples that people gave in this class, and pretty much any example that people give of a good website, a well-designed website, is that it allows people to achieve their goals easily. All right? Therefore, that's where I start off talking about web design, is from the perspective of let's make sure we have the goals defined well for our website before we start working on it. And there's goals that exist for the two parties in the website transaction. In other words, the people that are visiting the website have goals, and the people who are creating the website have goals. All right? And to the degree that you can solve both of those goals, both sets of goals, the site's going to be successful, and the site's going to be good. Now, the one thing that we did to sort of extend that model a little bit, I have my camera set for a specific reason, so I want to get in camera here. One thing to keep in mind and to acknowledge is when we talk about user goals, there's not just like one group of people who are the website users or one person who is the user where everyone has the identical goals. All right? There's different kinds of users that visit a site, and they may have slightly different goals. And therefore, in considering and designing a website, your first task, identifying the goals, you ought to pay attention to the different kinds of people and accommodate their goals as well. All right? A mistake that many people in software development make is think of the user as being one entity, all right, one undifferentiated entity, and they all have the same goals, so we're going to solve it. In my mind, to editorialize for a minute, this is where software like Microsoft Word goes wrong, right? Microsoft Word has approximately, and I counted them one day, so I know, Microsoft Word has approximately 16 trillion features. I just made that up. I didn't really count them. Let's count them. Number 1, search. Number 2, search and replace. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to count them all. But where that goes wrong, where Microsoft Word goes wrong is, yes, there are people that are involved in creating some really cool, amazing desktop publishing, to use an old term, projects in Microsoft Word. That's true. What are most people using it for? Making memos and just like making their notes or doing this, that, or the other. So if you don't differentiate between those users, you make a software product that has millions of different features where you can do the most complicated things under the sun, but it's a pain to do the most simple thing. And that's sort of my reaction to Microsoft Word. All right? And it's not a matter of me not being able to figure it out. A lot of times software developers take sort of an arrogant attitude. It's like, of course you can do that. All you have to do is, with your left hand, hit Control-Alt function key, and with your right hand, hold down the F4, the F6, and then with your elbow, hit Enter. You know, it's not a matter of can you do it or can you figure out how to do it. It's that when I'm in the mode of working on Word, my goal is to get my job done, not to explore the panorama of features of Word. Right? I want to get done. You know, I want to do what I want to do. That's why, again, I mentioned, and I think someone said that they saw it in the library, there's a great book that says, Don't Make Me Think. It's not that people visiting your website can't think. It's that they shouldn't have to. It should be straightforward. All right? It's like going into a store. You shouldn't have to, like, explore every inch of the store to try to figure out where the shoe department is. And if the shoes are divided like casual and dress and by size and all that, it should be obvious. You should just go in, okay, this is the kind of shoe I want. Here's the shoe section, here's the kind of shoe, all right, boom, there's my size. Should be straightforward and intuitive. And websites should be no different. And so don't look down on your users and say, well, you know, how dumb are they if they can't figure out the 65 different clicks that they need to get to the content? No, that's your fault for not spending the time to design it. correctly. At any rate, goals are on the top of the list. That's the most important thing. All right? Goals for the organization creating the site, goals for the users of the site, and the users of the site being not one undifferentiated mass of people, but being individuals. Unfortunately, we can't develop a website for every individual on earth, so we group them into different categories. And those categories we represent by personas, which is sort of the last thing we talked about. Now, even when you talk about larger websites, even an organization has sort of different subgroups, each of which wants to get their goals across. You know, there are, for example, here at Learning Community College, there's financial aid. They have their goals out of the website. There's enrollment services. They have their goals. There's the academic divisions and so on. So as you get bigger, you find that it's not just the organization and the user, but it's different parts of the organization, different sorts of users. So goals are number one on the list. That's why that's the first thing we talk about when designing a website. I don't know if you can read that or not, but it's there. Here comes my demonstration. I hope this goes well. All right? This is the most important thing. This is my beverage. This will keep me awake for the first part of class today. All right? Because I'm not really a morning person. It might seem that way because I come in and try to be animated. One of the reasons I do that is I feel if I keep it low-key, I'm liable to doze off. So I try to keep the enthusiasm up. All right? Here's these two things. We'll talk about what these two things are in a minute. These are our goals. That's the most important thing, right? And look, sits on top of these two things. Even though I haven't opened it yet, so we won't have a spill, but it would shake it up and it would explode when I open it. What happens if I remove one of these things? Boom, this is going down. All right? So what are these two things then? All right? These two things, the two pillars on which the goals rest, are content and design. Wish they had the same number of letters. This looks off balance. I'll write design a little bit bigger so it evens out. There we go. Neither one of these is more important than the other, right? In this analogy, because if I remove the content pillar, the goals tumble. If I remove the design pillar, the goals tumble. All right? The goals are what needs to be achieved. What needs to be achieved from the perspective of the organization, and and what needs to be achieved from the perspective of the user or users, personas, and so on. Don't confuse these. They're related to be sure, but these two things support these. Let me give you an example so that maybe this will become more clear instead of drawing these things and wondering, like, why would this guy want to balance Mountain Dew on top of erasers or anything like that. One thing I see often in when people define their goals is they list as a goal that the site should have good navigation. All right? That makes sense, right? Who would want to develop a site that doesn't have good navigation? Unfortunately, that's not really a goal of your website. That is a design aspect of your website. Of course you want it to have good navigation. You want people to be able to find the stuff that they're looking for, and so on. But that's not why people are visiting their page, all right, or your site. So in other words, here I am, an employee of Lorraine County Community College. Am I ever going to wake up in the morning and say, here I am, you know, I'm awake in the morning. I need to go and check and see how great the navigation is on Lorraine County Community College's website. No. All right? It's not the reason why I'm going to the site. Once I get there, I'm hoping that there's good navigation. But my goals are things like, let me go in and find out how many people are enrolled in my fall classes. That might be a goal. All right? I need to enter grades. I need to enter midterm grades. All right? I need to enter attendance. I need to check to see what a prerequisite for a class is. All these things are goals. All these things are reasons why I would visit the site. Simply enjoying the nice colors, the navigation, those have nothing to do with the goals of the user. Those support the goals. So in other words, if the navigation is terrible, all right, I'm not able to do what I set out to do. All right? That doesn't mean that good navigation is a goal. Good navigation is a design aspect that supports the goals. Likewise, content. And this gets to be a little bit more of a gray area. All right? Let's say I have a retail store. I'm not going to say my goal is to have a buy one, get one free coupon on my site. That's not really a goal. What is your goal? Well, maybe my goal is to increase sales. All right, make more money. All right. How I get to that goal, what content I put on the site, that supports that goal. So in that case, this is a part of the content. The fact I'm going to have a buy one, get one free coupon on the site. So that's not why I am making the site. I'm making the site to sell more stuff. And that is a piece of content I'm going to place on the site that supports it. So keep this in mind when you're defining your goals. All right? Make sure your goals relate to why you are making the site. Again, putting yourself in the shoes of the organization that's making the site. All right? Or why are your users visiting your site? What do they hope to accomplish? All right? So when you do that, anything that doesn't relate to those things probably relates here, to the content and the design. Now the specific content and design depends on the particular problem that you're trying to solve. And we'll come to this in a minute. The interesting thing is when you examine it, you'll find that there are very few design rules that apply for every single page, every single site on the web. All right? You could probably think of some that apply to most. But to apply to every, that's not the case. Let me give you an example of a design rule that few people would argue with. Have good navigation. All right? Yeah, that's a design rule that everyone's going to agree with. Can you think of a reason why a site would want to not have good navigation? Not easy necessarily, but I think it's possible. Oh?
I can think of one to demonstrate poor navigation.
Okay.
If it was kind of like a puzzle.
Exactly. If it was kind of like a puzzle, all right? What kind of website would you want to make like a puzzle? Can you think of a specific case of that? If you want to make your website act like a puzzle where it had confusing navigation. First of all, would that be like a standard business's website? Like, you want to find out the name of our East Coast sales representative, you're going to have to do some work for it first. Here, translate this into, no, it's not going to be a standard business site. What kind of site might have deliberately puzzling navigation? Like a game, all right? A game or a game-like site. So, for example, I remember watching the NBA playoffs, and again, we'll have a moment of silence for that before I proceed. But they were advertising a movie Ant-Man or something like that, like some really tiny superhero that's running around beating criminals or whatever. Let's say we had a site for a movie, an entertainment movie, you know, a movie that you're just going to go to just to have fun. It might be good to make the site like a game, where it's not laid out in front of you, but the user has to poke around a little bit to find what they need. Now that could work, provided it was entertaining, right? That you made it so that it was fun for people. It was like a fun puzzle instead of like, for God's sakes, I just need to know what theater this is playing at, right? And in a case like that, an unclear navigation could work. Now, what goal would you be satisfying by making the navigation a little puzzle-like? I like the phrase puzzle-like navigation instead of bad navigation, because in this case, the puzzle-like navigation is actually a feature of the site. It's a fun part of the site. When would that be a good idea? When the user's goal was what? To be entertained. All right? So, even something like clear navigation, 99.999% of the websites that you do in your life, your goal is, or one of the things you're going to want to have is a clear navigation. But it's possible for there to be a website that you have deliberately puzzling navigation because that makes the site fun. All right? Again, will those be standard websites for businesses? You know, your local car repair shop or your local community college or your local hospital or something like that. No, right? Sites like that, you want to get in, you want to get the information quickly, and so on. Why? Because your goals are different visiting their site. No one visits their hospital's website for fun. All right? So therefore, a fun navigation scheme and a fun design won't support the goals. All right? However, someone might go to a movie site or something along those lines, and a fun navigation, a puzzling navigation might support those goals. Let me see if I can find this site. Pull this one up. And we'll see if any of you know what this site is. Okay, good. Here's a website. It's actually kind of famous. It's called I Love Bees. So let's click on it. Unfortunately, we have a fast connection here. So this popped up immediately. Let me try bringing this up in another browser window. In a different browser. Oh, similar thing. With old connections, with old internet connections, you had a website that you can see a little bit of it behind there. It looked like a family-owned site that raised bees and sold honey. All right? Home, about me, the hives, honey, fun stuff. Yet, obviously, when you see this, well, that's kind of weird. It looks like an error message. Click on that. Does anyone have any idea what this is about? Pardon me? No. It's a legit site. It's not a scam. It's not. It's not satire. It's
It's like a story.
It's like a story in a way. Yes. It actually promoted a product. I'll give you that hint. All right? What product do you suppose it promoted? Pardon me?
Honey.
Honey? Good guess, but no. Again, breaking all the design rules, right? You look at that page, you think, well, it has something to do with bees. One of the primary fundamental design rule is to make it absolutely clear what your site is. Here they did just the opposite. They did a swerve on you, right? They made you think it's about one thing and it's really about something else. What was the big sort of flagship game for the original Xbox? Halo. That was a site to promote Halo, believe it or not. As you click through those things, you hear the story and you hear the backstory of the characters and the stuff in Halo. So this became part of a viral marketing campaign. All right? Looks like a bee's website. If you were really a beekeeper and you stumbled across that site, you'd scratch your head and say, what? And move from there. If, however, what typically happened is on the gaming forums and bulletin boards and things like that, people started recognizing, and I'm sure they probably put the word out, you know, someone from whoever developed the game probably made some posts like, I found this site, boy, this looks interesting. And then the word spread. So it was a fascinating way to get the story out about a particular product. Now, that one worked, right? I mean, it worked. It's an example of a viral marketing campaign that worked by breaking effectively all of the design rules that you're going to read in a book. All right? It does everything wrong. The site isn't clearly defined when you go to it. The navigation's confusing, this, that, and the other. But it worked. Now, a few things to say about that. That is very risky to do, right? In other words, I would not suggest Lorraine County Community College change their website to be something like, you know, here is a stir-fry cookbook site. And when you get on there, a message pops up and says, haha, just kidding, this is Lorraine County Community College's website. We're doing this to celebrate our new culinary programs, and, you know, here's a link to the course. You know, that wouldn't work for that. For a straightforward, I hesitate to use the word simple, but that's why I like straightforward. For a straightforward website, for sort of mainstream kind of content, you want to play it by the book. You want to follow the design rules. However, in certain circumstances, it's okay to bend and play with those rules a little bit. So the design of a site really depends on the goals. The design supports the goal. Back to this here. What does that mean? That means a fun site should have a fun design. All right? A serious site should have a serious design. A metal site should have a metal design. A jazz site should have a jazz design. A folk site should have a folk design, and so on and so on and so on. The design supports the goals of the user. So again, in the case of a video game site, people's goals for playing video games is fun. One of their goals, right? So therefore, the design can be fun. The design goes along with the goals, and it supports it. Visiting a hospital website, a college website, a law firm website, an automobile dealership website, none of those you're likely to do for enjoyment, for fun. You have other goals. You have more directed goals. Instead of meandering around the site and keeping yourself amused, you have questions that you want answered. And therefore, the design supports this. All right? So, let me summarize goals, and let me come back to wrap up this segment of the design document. Interesting thing about this design document is I spend a lot of time talking about the first section, a little bit less time talking about the third section, a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. All right? Why is that? Well, because a lot of the important stuff of the design comes in right at the beginning of the design, just like the most important stuff of the project comes in right at the beginning of the project. Likewise, a lot of this stuff in the early phases of your design document is very conceptual, abstract. All right? Later on in the design, when we start talking about wireframes and prototypes, that's stuff that's tangible. You can look at it on a sheet of paper and say, yeah, that makes sense. All right? So, first part of the design document. I want to see goals for the organization, whoever is making your project site. Now, it might be a fan page on some topic, on a video game or a band or whatever. All right? Or you might make up a hypothetical business. Or some people even have a small business or a nonprofit that they're associated with. But you have to put yourself in the shoes of the people making the site and come up with some goals. You have to come up with some personas, 3 different people, and come up with goals for the users. All right? And that's what you need to do in the first part of it. Let's look at the design document. I say, forgive me, I'm still remembering how to work Canvas. That's not it. Files. There we go. That's where, by the way, a visited link style would have come in handy. I'd have known I already visited files and didn't find what I was looking for. All right, just as an aside. All right, project. The design. So your design document, and you're just going to do this in Word. All right, and you also have. We'll see later on, you'll have some other files, but most of your design document will just be a Word document. And the first part of it is the strategy portion. And what you're going to do is you're going to have a description of the site's topic purpose, just like a paragraph, a narrative paragraph to say, I am creating this website for my jewelry business where I make jewelry and sell jewelry at home, all right? Or my sister-in-law's jewelry business or whatever. You have a prioritized list of 3 of the goals for making this project. In other words, here is why this business needs this, all right? And maybe, in the case of the jewelry business, maybe your goal would be, number 1, to sell more product. Number 2, maybe to expose your product to possibly retailers that might want to carry your goods, right? And so on. Keep in mind, the more specific you can design the goals, the better off you're going to be. But also keep in mind that the goals are what you want to accomplish. The best of all is when your goals are measurable. So if you say, I want to be able to, all right, that's something that after your website goes live, you can measure how many sales you had the year before, measure how many sales you had the year after, and say, yes, I achieved that goal, or no, I didn't. Unfortunately, it's not always possible to do that. All right, sometimes your goals are vague, but if you can make them specific, that's all the better. Prioritized list of 3 user goals. Same sort of thing. What does a person want to accomplish by visiting your page? Well, number 1, they might want to buy jewelry. Number 2, they might want to, they might be the buyer at a retail store and thinking, gee, should we carry this person's goods? And so on. Create 3 personas, and we looked at an example of a persona before. That's where you actually make up a person and give them some characteristics as a way of allowing you to think outside of the box and think beyond the idea of there being a user out there, because in reality there's different kinds of users out there. And then format it in a Word document or some text document in a professional way. You know, bulleted list and so on. All right? What we're going to do now is we're going to take a little exercise. All right? You can work individually or you can work together, and it'll take about 10 minutes to do this. Or I'm planning on taking 10 minutes. If I see that after 10 minutes you guys are still discussing this and having a good time and being productive, we can go on longer. If I see after 7 minutes people are discussing their plans for the weekend, then we'll cut it short and discuss it. But here's what I want you to do. Let's say you are brought on board to do the website for a band. I'd say I'm looking for the erasers. That's right, they were props. Let's say, and I'm just going to give you this, you're going to have to fill in some of the blanks. Now if you have questions, feel free to ask, but I'm deliberately keeping this a little bit vague. You can work on this individually, you can work on it together. But let's say you are in charge of creating a Lorain County-based, a website for a Lorain County-based pop band that has live appearances and also sells their music. What I'd like you to do is identify 3 goals for the band, or for the site rather, from the band's perspective. 3 goals from the user's perspective, and 3 personas. In other words, what are 3 different sorts of people that could be interested in this website? Okay? So let's take 10 minutes or so, work together, work on your own, and then we'll discuss what you come up with. apologize for the people watching this YouTube video. I probably should have had like the Jeopardy theme or something going on loop for the 10 minutes or so we were gone. First of all, let me ask some questions, because my aim was to craft this question carefully. Is there a significance I said it was a Lorain County-based band? Do you think? We have some yeses and some nos. What would be the significance of it, one way or another?
They're a smaller band.
Okay.
You get the word out.
Okay. Anyone else have a different thought on that? That would actually be something. And again, this is sort of ambiguous. You would have to find that out from them. When I say Lorain County based, does that mean that these people have great jobs and they play gigs on the weekend and they're happy to do that? Or they are Lorain County based because that's where they live, but if they had their way, they would be, playing Yankee Stadium, which I don't think even exists anymore, does it? But anyhow, so yeah, that would be a question you would have to find out. Any significance to be saying a pop band? Pardon me? They don't play good music. Exactly. That was the significance of that. Absolutely. You nailed it. Next question. What does pop music mean to you? Name a pop musician. Madonna. Okay. Name a pop musician. Don't Bieber. Name a pop musician. Celine Dion. Name a pop musician. Okay. Name a pop musician. Okay. All right. And if you ask me, I might say the Beatles. All right. So we have a lot of different views of what pop music is. If we had a bigger class, you were liable to get from anywhere from Frank Sinatra, through to Taylor Swift. Thank you. I would say, and I'm not even trying to be a music snob here. I just honestly couldn't think of a current pop musician. Early in the morning, the brain is blank. So why do you suppose I picked pop musician? And again, let's remove the editorializing out of the equation here.
Everybody can picture something.
I said it because it's deliberately vague. And if you're a pop band, you probably better do a good job saying more about yourself than you're a pop band. Right? Okay. So let's go backwards up the list. What personas did people come up with for this band? What were 3 kinds of people that might be visiting this site? A what?
A label rep.
A label rep. Excellent. Someone shopping around for new bands to sign. Absolutely.
Current or potential fan.
All right. Current or potential fan. I will list that as 2 separate things. Other ones? Family. Absolutely. That's where the mentioning it being a Lorain County, small scale, just starting out, family, you want to support your family, right? Where is cousin Fred playing this weekend? Something like that. Other musicians. Anyone else? Venue owners, very good. Anyone else? Well, we'll put that under family. All right, but yeah, that's a very good one. Anything else? Okay. Okay. I'm going to lump that in with potential fan, although that probably is different. All right? I would think a potential fan would be kind of like, hey, I heard, a friend come up to me, hey, I heard a good band I'll bet you might like. you know, and then I'd go and check out their website. Versus if I'm like, gee, I'm kind of bored, what am I going to do this weekend? And I might not even be thinking of going to music. I might be going to a movie or going to a Crushers game or whatever. So I'll put that as a separate one. Local person, what to do this weekend. Anything else? Now, for a Lorain County band, I don't know if you'd get this, but if you were talking about like maybe a more popular band, you might get the obsessive fan. All right? And again, I'm going to put them in a different category because they probably have different goals. And I don't even mean it like obsessive from the viewpoint of like they're going to stalk the person and show up at their house or something like that, because we certainly don't want to encourage that, right? Not on our website. But I'm talking about someone that is like, let's say if we were talking about, say, a Beatles fans. There's people that like the Beatles. Then there's people that want to hear, like, you know, do you have the 15th outtake of Let It Be that was not released? And I want to hear that section where Paul slightly changed the lyrics, because that is highly important to me, because I listen to the Beatles 23 out of 24 hours a day. You know, that sort of thing. Someone that's really into it. Like, for example, you know, you do get this in the pop world. Sometimes, again, depending on the band and the kind of music, sometimes people are interested in the personalities of the musicians. You know, like, what's their favorite breakfast cereal, blah, blah, blah. You know, people that are really obsessive about it. You know, thinking of, like, the Justin Bieber fans of the world, perhaps. All right? And, like, if we're talking about, like, a jazz group, jazz musicians are notoriously interested in, like, outtakes and alternate versions, you know. So, like, you'll buy a record that will have, like, 3 versions of the same song, because jazz is improvisational, and each version is almost like a different song. So, you know, they're really fascinating. So I'll put, I put obsessive goals, I meant obsessive fan. All right. I like what you guys came up with, because you didn't write down a fan of the band and then left it at that, all right? Because these are all that. Now, the question would become, are all these important for a band creating a site? They may or may not be, right? If you're thinking about someone, again, that has a good job, that has a band that plays on the weekends, they may not be terribly interested in signing to a record deal. They may say, you know what, that's a nice dream, but I'm not really interested at this point in my life in doing that. So maybe you wouldn't cater to those people's needs. You know, maybe like, you know, hey, we don't really have any obsessive fans. We don't really need to carry to those needs. Other musicians, well, maybe, maybe not, and so on. So we could take the specific circumstances of the band and sort of whittle these down. Maybe only some of these would be relevant for the specific band that we were talking about. All right? But all these are good from a brainstorming perspective. And once you've identified that, you can start saying what's relevant. Again, a lot of design is about making sure you understand what your options are and then picking the things that are going to give you, as they say, the most bang for the buck. It would be great, you know, probably every band in the world, you know, would say, yeah, boy, it'd be great if we got signed to a major record label and toured the world. But for maybe some of them, maybe that's not their first focus. Maybe they don't think it's realistic, or maybe not even terribly interested into it. That's where you go when you pick and choose. What we want to avoid is a Microsoft Word syndrome, where we look and we say, here are a dozen different groups that we could be catering after. Which one should we do? Let's do them all. All right? Instead, you prioritize and you pick and you go for the most bang for the buck. All right? When you're developing a website and you're identifying goals, you want to hit the ones that are most important. And you want to hit those well. All right? You don't necessarily want to go for everything. Because keep in mind that anything you add to a site has the potential to distract people from the stuff that is really important. All right? So in other words, if you have something that maybe you think that 50% of your website visitors are going to be interested in, and you have along with that content that you think 2% of your website visitors are going to be interested in. If you put all those things on the same website, then it becomes very difficult for people to find the stuff that they're really interested in, if you throw in all that stuff that people might be interested in. Now, I'm going to ask you now for user goals. All right? We've defined the different groups of users. What are some user goals that we could have for these groups of users? All right? Discovering a different way to have a good time. All right? What's another one? Interested in purchasing music. Gee, I saw this great band last weekend. I'd love to buy a CD of theirs. Just as I'm getting used to saying CD instead of like vinyl record, CDs are kind of obsolete now, so whatever. To buy a download or a whatever the next thing will be. I'm sorry, I interrupted someone.
Oh, I just said find a schedule.
Find a schedule. Where are they going to play? So, hey, I like this band. We had a good time when we saw them 2 months ago. I wonder if they're going to be around this weekend anywhere. Very valid. Now, which group would these fit into? Which group? Which personas would this fall into? Could fall into several of them, right? In other words, a local person who's just looking to find out what's going this weekend might want to do these things. Maybe not necessarily purchase a CD, but might want to know where they're playing because hey, maybe their friend recommended them. A hardcore or obsessive fan. An obsessive fan probably already knows where they're playing this weekend. All right, so they don't need that information. But a current fan, a regular fan, yeah, they might want to know. Or a potential fan. Gee, my brother told me I might like them. Where are they playing this weekend? So these goals might fall under several of these categories. All right. What's another goal that you could have from these folks?
You want to preview the music?
Preview the music. Yeah, my brother told me that the Beatles were great, and he was right about that one. All right? He also told me the band Bread was great, and they're horrible. All right? So I got to take what he says with a grain of salt. All right? I definitely have to call him later today to tell him I used him as an example in class. All right? But the thing is if he tells me, hey, I heard this good band, okay, let me give him a listen. Are they more like the Beatles or are they more like Bread? Fair enough. All right? Next goal that we could have. Yes?
I think if there are other musicians of the label representing.
Right.
Sign something or looking for?
Exactly. A goal could be finding a band to sign to the label. What would a musician, what would be like sort of the corresponding thing for a musician? What would be similar to that? Go ahead.
Looking for someone to add to the band.
Looking for something to add to the band. It's like, yeah, gee, I heard this band has a great guitar player. Maybe I can get them to join my band. Or, gee, my band just fired me. You know, I heard such and such band is good. Are they looking for a new bass player? All right, could be a goal.
Then you're almost, let's say they have a bigger band coming in town.
Exactly. Exactly. Find an opening act, or even a smaller venue, find an act for the weekend. All right. Even, again, depending on the scale of the band, you know, is this a band that could play weddings? You know, possible. You know, I assume there are some weddings in the world that still have live bands instead of DJs. Maybe not. There's been, let's see, the last, I was going to say, well, have I even gone to a wedding this century yet? Yes, I have. And I think they had a DJ. But at any rate, it's not unheard of to say I'm going to have a band play at my wedding, at least in the past. All right. Family, yeah, you know, cousin Jimmy's in a band, let's go look them up. Potential fan, local person. All right, we kind of covered these. And again, I'm not sure if I wrote all of these down, but, you know, it gives you a good sense of that. Again, it's a matter of prioritizing. And unfortunately for us, in our example, unless we had that band sitting with here today, we probably can't prioritize these. How important is it for this band to get a record contract? Maybe it's really important. Maybe they don't really care. This is a side gig for them, and they don't really care. All right. Maybe they don't make recordings to sell. All right. Maybe they just play live and, you know, whatever. So you'd have to know more details to prioritize these. All right. But at least we've given a lot of possibilities, and then you can look at and prioritize. And that's sort of a recurring theme that we're going to see at every step with this design phase, is we're identifying the possibilities and we're prioritizing them. All right? We're probably not going to say we want to do all of these, right? Because again, Microsoft Word syndrome. We're going to pick the ones that we're most interested in and that are most important to us and what we're really going after. And how do we know that? That depends on the second part of the equation, and that is the organization's needs and goals. All right? So we're not necessarily going to want to go for everything, but the stuff we do, we're going to want to really do correctly. What are some of the goals for the organization? What might the band's goals be? Those are probably pretty self-explanatory, but promote themselves. Okay. That's good. That's a goal. Can we make that a little more specific? Yeah, sell X number of CDs or downloads. All right. What would be another goal? Or another even, how do I want to say, refinement of promoting themselves?
Have some good advertising clear with the place and all of it and so on.
Okay. To promote live gigs, and maybe a way to make that more tangible is to say to increase attendance. You know, last time we played in this club, we had 75 people show up. This time we want 100. All right? That's a tangible goal. Increase attendance at particular venues. Maybe get a recording contract. That might be one of their goals. All right? Maybe not. Again, you lay out the options so that you can selectively choose between the options and what is best, keeping in mind that these things all go together. All right? Questions at this point? Now, this is just the first phase, and we spent, I don't know, an hour and a half talking about this. Don't worry, we're not going to spend an hour and a half on each phase. All right? This is the first phase, the strategy. I'm asking you to come up with 3 personas only. You can do more if you want, but I don't want, you don't feel obligated to. But 3 personas for your website, and a prioritized list of 3 goals for the organization and 3 goals for the users. All right? And then write a little paragraph explaining. That's this section. The next section is the scope. And if I can remember my diagram, I'm not going to balance my Mountain Dew again because I started drinking it. But if you remember, goals are supported by content and design. Goals are defined in part 1, the strategy section. Content is defined in step 2, the scope section. sometimes known as the requirements section. The design, I mean, all of this is design, but the specific designs of the pages and all that happen in steps 3, 4, and 5. This sort of model, not this, but the steps that we're going through and it's defined in the document are contained in a book that used to be a required text for this class that no longer is, but I'm sure there's copies in the library, or you could borrow a copy from me if you really want to read it. And the book is called The Elements of User Experience. And it's written by Jesse James Garrett. I don't know, if my first name was Jesse and my middle name was James, I don't know if I would go by Jesse James Garrett. I don't know, and it's kind of cool. And by the way, didn't someone with the name of Garrett, wasn't that the person that shot Jesse James? Pat Garrett? Or am I not remembering? I went to high school with all these guys, so I'm reminiscing. I'm just remembering, I remember, I think a Bob Dylan song about Pat Garrett shooting. So I never realized Jesse James Garrett has both Jesse James and, well, that's fascinating. All right, anyhow, but I digress. So that book defines these 5 steps. This little Stonehenge thing that I just drew, all right, I just made that up this morning, all right, and I'm pretty happy with it, actually. That's why I like teaching the same class over and over again. You sort of discover things that you didn't think about before. So we talked about goals. The second step is to come up with requirements, or the content that's going to be on the site. So, in the case of our band example, we would start and we would think of let's say the goals of the band are to greater live show attendance, gain more fans, sell more music. And again, ideally these would be more specific, but we'll put them up there for now. Maybe the goals of the users will be to decide if we want to hire this band. Find a live show to attend. And finally, maybe buy music. So these are the goals of the users. These are the goals of the organization. In the requirements, we decide what we're going to put on the site to achieve those goals. It's one of the pillars of Stonehenge to support the goals. So, greater live show attendance. What are some things that we could put on the site that might help us achieve that goal of greater live show attendance? Schedule. Yep. People aren't going to hear you play if they don't know where you're playing and when, right? Please come to our live shows. Where and when are you going to be there? I'm not going to tell you. Figure it out. You know, it's not going to work very well, right? So you have a schedule of that. What's something else that you could do to increase your live attendance? All right. Directions to venues. That's a good one. Didn't even think of that one. Or a link to directions or something like that. Or a link to the venue. All right. What's another thing you could do? Oh, that's a good one. You could offer specials for purchases. All right. Anything else? Exactly. Maybe a video snippet. Gee, those people sure look like they're having a good time. All right. Anything else? We could probably think of a million of them. I just want to I just want to make sure that, again, remember, part of design is to come up with all your options, and then you like whittle them down or prioritize them. All right? Maybe testimonials. You know, Sam said, "Oh, I had a lot of fun at their show last week at the Poorhouse in Amherst," or whatever. All right? Now that you got to take it with a grain of salt, right? Because that could be the brother-in-law, or the bass player, or whatever. But that might be one potential thing. If you, for example, were reviewed in a newspaper, that would tend to give a little more credibility to it. All right? Now, we could come up with a list of these for all of these different goals. But I want to show you something. Each of these tasks or requirements or pieces of content, I'll call them requirements, can map to more than one goal. For example, having a schedule on your site certainly could do something to help the live attendance. Might allow us to gain more fans, might allow us to sell more music. You know, a lot of bands, especially a lot of smaller touring bands, they make a lot of their money by selling merch at their merch table. So they perform. What's a better time to sell something than right there at the venue when the people are pumped and they still remember what a good time they had? All right? Directions to venue. Again, and if we look at this other side of this, you know, a video snippet might help a person decide to buy music, might help them decide if they want to go see the band. All right? Gee, the $10 a ticket seems a little high, but on their website they got to buy one, get one. Yeah, I could spring for $5. And so on. My point is when you're done and you develop a list of all your requirements, all the stuff you're going to put on the site, you should do a check going in two directions. You should check to make sure that each of the requirements relates to at least one goal. And then you should check to see that every goal corresponds to at least one requirement. All right? So there should be like a matching. Now, it could very well be more than one, right? One requirement could actually correspond to several goals. Or one goal could actually have several requirements associated with it. But they better correspond to this. All right? So if I have on here as a requirement that I am going to feature an example of the drummer's creative writing. All right? Well, that might be nice, might be a great writer, but that really doesn't have anything to do with the goals that we defined. I really doubt someone's going to look and say, boy, that's a great poem, it's a great short story, I want to go buy that person's record. I guess it's possible, but it doesn't really relate to that. So if those are my goals, then saying that I want to focus the band members' creative writing probably isn't something we want on the site. Again, what's the harm of saying, well, yeah, I know it doesn't really relate to the goals, but what's the harm of putting it on there? Well, the harm of putting it on there is it has the potential of distracting people from the stuff that is important. All right? So if you have a piece of content that you're thinking on putting on your site and yet it doesn't relate to one of the goals, get rid of it. All right? Get rid of it. Now, the flip side is also true. If I have a goal and there's nothing that relates to it, all right? If I have a goal and there's nothing that relates to it, then one of two things. Either that goal isn't very important, so get rid of it and don't consider it one of the goals, or figure out something that does relate to the goal. All right? So, if one of the user goals is to sign to a record label, and there isn't some content in the site that would allow someone to do that, like contact information or something like that, then you need to add that to the list. So, to review, requirements are the content part of the supporting of the goals. You define the goals, you then figure out the content that is going to help achieve those goals, the specific content. And each piece of content you define better relate to at least one goal. In fact, I would suggest putting them on a sheet of paper and drawing the lines, just like I did here. All right, so every requirement should match up to one goal. The flip side is also true. Every goal better have at least one requirement associated with it. So, if that's not the case, then you need to go back and rethink and make sure that your goals and your requirements do line up correctly. This will likely just be a bulleted list of requirements. All right? You don't need to, at this point, think about like how you're going to organize your site. In other words, am I going to have a page for recordings and a page for live concerts? Am I going to have a page for each band member? Am I going to have a page for... You don't have to worry about that at this point. We're simply defining the stuff that we want on our site, and later on we're going to figure out where to put that stuff. All right? Questions about this? I mentioned later on we're going to figure out where to put that stuff. Guess what? It's later on. All right? So now our job is to figure out where to put stuff. So, the next thing you develop is a structure of your website. Now, if we think of the structure of a website, we think about taking all those requirements, all those pieces of information that we said is going to be on our website, and figuring out where we're going to put them, how many pages we're going to have, and where we're going to put them. All right? Now, you know that putting everything on one page is not a good idea. So you're not going to have one page that's going to have every single thing on it. All right? So there you know that that's a bad idea. Also, putting each requirement on its own page is also not a good idea. So there, that gives you a range of how many pages you need. All right? You need at least one, but you shouldn't have as many pages as you have requirements. So you figure out how to group things and where to put things together. So, maybe you do this. Maybe, and again, I'm just sort of speculating based on a kind of band or whatever. Maybe you have a home page, recordings, live appearances, and contact info. Maybe then you have, under recordings, maybe you have, let's say the band has 3 recordings out, maybe you have a separate page for each of those. All right? Maybe under live appearances you have a schedule. And video clips. That's one way you could organize the site. It's one way you could organize the site. Is this the best way? I don't know. You would have to know more information about the particular band and so on. Now, again, design, considering your options, picking the best one. There are other ways that you could organize this. All right? Other ways you could organize this stuff. All right? But we're going to shift gears for a second. We're going to forget our band. All right? We're going to consider another example. All right? Because this example, there aren't too many alternatives, all right, for this. All right? It's a simple enough example that, yeah, you're probably going to have some form of this. Now, depending on recordings, if they had a lot of recordings, you might have a separate page for each recording. If they only had a handful of recordings, maybe you just have a single recording page. Likewise, maybe you put their schedule and videos on a live appearance page. So you do have some choices to make, but you really don't have as many choices as you have with another subject. Here's what I want you to do. And I don't necessarily want you to draw a full organizational chart, but I want you to consider a sporting goods store. Let's say you're doing a website for a sporting goods store that has a lot of different products. You know, think of it as like a big full-service sporting goods store. All right? I want you to spend a few minutes to brainstorm, again, you can work together, work individually, with different ways you could organize the products in a sporting goods store. Okay? Again, we'll take maybe 5 minutes for this one, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss the different alternatives. Okay, we're getting into the design pillar now, right? We've defined our goals, we've defined our content. We're now figuring out how to design, design the rest of the site. And the first thing to do is kind of come up with a structure of the site. We know we probably don't want every piece of content on its own page by itself, and we know we don't want one page. So figuring out how to group things together, how to organize it, that is an important part of a good, clear navigation, right? That's the first step. Good, clear navigation doesn't just mean make sure the links are visible and that you know what to click on and all that. Good navigation also is involved with having a site that is divided and organized and grouped correctly. So it's logical. And it's logical not just to the people that develop the site, but logical to the people, the users that are visiting it. If you're ever in doubt if this is a good organization, put yourself in your persona's shoes and say, would this make sense for Fred? Would this make sense for Mary? And so on down the line. Okay, what are some ways that we could organize the pages on a sporting goods store's site? They don't have to be good. I just want ways. By sport. All right. This, by the way, is called the organizing principle. So you could actually have, for sections of the site, you could actually have, so for example, for tennis, you could have an organizing principle for how you're going to organize all the tennis stuff. But the top level, what you're saying, is an organizing principle of sport. So you have a home page. Then you would have tennis. Then you'd have golf, inline skating, basketball, and so on. What's the advantage of that? Yes?
I'm interested in tennis, I don't have to go all of them.
Exactly. So for example, it's like, well, I haven't played tennis in a while. Maybe I'll get back into it. What am I going to need? I'm going to need some tennis balls. I'm going to need a racket. Might need shoes. Boom. You go there. Everything you need is there. What's the disadvantage of that, of this setup? Disadvantage of this setup. Might not be able to catalog everything, right? So for example, you got, a pair of sweatpants. Where do those fit in here? Do you have different sweatpants for tennis versus basketball? I don't know. You probably don't. So you might not be able to fit everything in this. All right? Or you have those things that are sort of generic things like I need, again, sweatpants or T-shirt. Well, where do those really belong? Yes? You could have a miscellaneous category, again, but that could also be a little confusing. All right? Because would you think if in addition to needing tennis balls and tennis rackets, I need a pair of shorts, would you think, well, after I look through that, then I go to miscellaneous? Yeah, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, just trying to consider all the options. This, by the way, is called an organizing principle. So in this case, the organizing principle would be by sport. Yes?
Oh, well, just talking about
Right.
you just have group clothing.
Okay.
That every section has things that have clothing links,
Okay.
craft clothing links.
Okay, that very well could be good. So you could have underneath that tennis equipment and clothing. All right? That's a good possibility. What's another totally different way of doing it other than by organizing principle of sport? I'm sorry?
Do it by, summer, winter.
Seasons. Exactly. Like, oh my goodness, I have cabin fever. It's the middle of January and it hasn't gotten above 10 degrees. And I've been in my house for 48 days straight, and I need to get out and do something. I need to exercise. All right? What can I do? And it would be very valid for that. Maybe I wouldn't even think of. What's good about that is with the sport, that would work good if I knew the sport I was interested in. But what if I, get back from the doctor says you need to do more exercise. All right? Or I have cabin fever and I want to get out of the house. Would I realize, for example, that I could buy snowshoes at a sporting goods store? All right? Gee, that looks like fun. It looks like it's easy to do, and so on. Now, is this better than sports? I'm not by organized by sport. I'm not debating that. I'm just putting out that there are options, and that each of these options are probably going to have something good about it. All right? Now, second thing that you might say, all right, I try to read people's minds. All right? It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. Is you might say on the web, what's nice about the web is you don't have to categorize stuff one way. All right? You could categorize stuff by sport. You could have a different navigation that categories stuff seasonally. And you could have the same pages underneath and categorize a different way. That's true. However, that could also get complicated. And again, then that could be confusing as well. So that's an option, but it also could be confusing. For our purposes, that's more like a network sort of organization. For our purposes, we're going to stick to these sort of simple hierarchies. All right? Because with smaller websites, these kind of things, like a simple hierarchy, makes sense. Another way of organizing the content. Regional? Okay. I like that. I don't know if I've ever gotten that one yet. So we could have urban sports, country sports, lake sports, snow sports, mountain sports, and so on. All right? Potentially could work. All right? This is almost like seasonal. All right? In that, gee, I live in the city and I need to get exercise. Just like it's winter and I need to get exercise. What are some things I could do? And I might not have any idea of like all the opportunities for fitness within the city. But if I have a separate urban thing, I can go to that and say, I never realized that I could get I was going to say get a bicycle, but I think most people know that you could probably get a bicycle and ride around. But there might be something like bicycle that like, yeah, I could do this within my city or whatever. Disadvantages, well, there's probably a gray area between country sports and like lake sports or mountain sports. There could be some overlap there, and that could be confusing. Another way of organizing it. By item. How so? Okay. By item. So, we have our home. Maybe we have shoes, clothing, and equipment. All right. that sort of removes the question that we had before about where am I going to find sweatpants, right? Or where am I going to find shoes that I might use for multiple sports? You know, like, hey, I'm not a pro athlete. I'm not going to have cycling shoes and walking shoes and basketball shoes. I'm going to buy a pair of shoes that work, you know. And yeah, okay, if that affects my performance a little bit, that's okay because I'm probably not making the Olympic team anyhow, all right? Clothing, yeah, I need sweatpants to go to the clothing section. Now, so that's the good side of this. Is it pretty much directs you right off the bat. What's the downside of this?
You're still going to have to specify the part.
Yeah, you might have underneath that further thing. That's true. A database could come in. Yeah. Again, yeah. Let's try to keep things on a conceptual level, though. You know, the technical details of how we do this. You know, that's the topic of every other web development class that you'll take, or you could take. All right?
If you want to know what you need for tennis.
Exactly. Exactly. I want to take up tennis, or my kid is going to join a soccer league. You know, I don't know what people do in soccer leagues. You know, what do they need? You know, well, I don't know. All right, that would be less clear, and I might have to do some hopping around. Whereas the first organization structure that we had, where it was organized by sports, it's like, okay, I want to take up some tennis balls. I better buy some tennis shoes, you know, and so on down the line. All right. Other, yes. Outdoor, indoor. Okay, that would be. I'm just going to put outdoor, indoor because I can't really think of a better way. That would be a more general. Right, right. And again, that would remove the issue with is fishing a lake sport or is fishing a mountain sport or a country sport, I think was the other region we had. So that would be good. Any others? Yes.
I was thinking of just, you could go based on like relevance, so like the NBA we're just going on, so basketball's going to be a bigger thing, and then next coming up would be like different.
Ooh, that's intriguing. You could do something based on relevance. Again, we're brainstorming, so we're coming up with ideas, so that could be potentially good. In other words, that in a way is almost a variation of the season one, where instead of having specifically winter, spring, fall, and summer, or whatever order they're in, you have current season, future season, way in the future season. What's good about that is, part of it depends on what you're looking for in a sporting goods store, but like a lot of quote sporting goods stores are like T-shirts for your favorite team stores. All right, so yeah, you could go and see baseball stuff out now, and so that could be potentially good. Others, yes.
Brands.
By brands, that's a good one. You could have Nike, Reebok, and so on and so forth. All right. That would be good because if you knew what you're looking for, you could find it quickly. I like, Asics running shoes. Boom, go to the Asics section. There you go. All right. Other ones. Yes. Intensity. Wow. I like that. That's another one that I never came up with. In other words, you could have like, I'm trying to think of ways of saying this. You could have like I hate to say because it sounds so like 1999, but you could have the extreme sports, where you're jumping off of buildings with parachutes on and stuff like that. Then you could have like walking and all that on the other end of the spectrum. But that's good. All right, or some variation of that. I'm kind of joking around with it, but that's legit. Yes, you had one back there. Men's, women's, children. All right, maybe adults and juniors. And underneath adults, you could have male, female, boys, girls. So that would be a possibility. Now, just in 15 minutes, let's say, we've came up with, I stopped writing after like a half dozen or so, and we did another 3 or 4 after that. So just in 15 minutes, we came up with like 10 different ideas. And they're all reasonable. Nothing anyone said would I look and say, really? Are you kidding? Like, no one said, like, put them in alphabetical order, Where it's like, yeah, you could do that, but I'm not sure that'd be the best idea. Every one people said had some merits to it. Of course, every one people said have some drawbacks to it as well. So how are you going to decide which path to take if there's all these different ways you could possibly organize it? Exactly. You're going to go back to the goals and you're going to go back to the personas and say which of these organizational methods, organizing principles make sense for what I'm trying to accomplish and what I expect the people that are visiting my site are expecting to accomplish. Absolutely. Because we could sit here till we're blue in the face talking about which is better, but it doesn't matter if it makes sense to us or what makes most sense to us. It matters what makes most sense to the people visiting the site. One thing you get all the time on websites is people that are very confident in saying, oh, that content's on our site. Yes, but you have to be part of the organization to understand it, right, and to be able to find it. I'll give you a short for instance, and actually, Learning Community actually altered their website. There are actually computer classes going back several years ago. Now we've sort of organized a little better. But say 3 or 4 years back, there were computer classes in at least 3 divisions. All right? The business division, the engineering division, and actually arts and humanities, and actually math and science. So I guess there were 4 divisions. Now, we made a big improvement of that by merging the business division with the engineering division. So now most of the computer classes are still in the one division, the business division. All right? But how many of you knew that before I told you? You're a student. No, you didn't know that. All right? So imagine a kid coming in from high school that likes computers. They like computers. They want to do that maybe as a degree and do that as their career. What division do you visit? Do you visit the business division or engineering division? Each one of those are reasonable. Could be. There's colleges that do it either way. The point is we want to make sure that we organize it not in a way that makes sense for us, that is, knowing the divisions and what courses are in each division, but what makes sense from an outsider's perspective. Kid that doesn't know anything about how Learning Community is organized, all right, how are they going to view this problem? How are they going to view this question? So, for the structure section, what I want is I want a little hierarchy diagram, just the way that I drew, that looks like an organizational chart. Most of your page ones are going to look the same. There's going to be a home page, and there's going to be a couple of pages coming off of that. And then you might get into a third layer, all right, depending on your topic. And then I want an explanation of why you chose that versus the other. So for this, for example, I might say that I decided to organize my sporting goods store by sport. All right? I considered other options. I considered organizing by season. I considered organizing by region and so on. But I think sport offers these advantages and blah, blah, blah. That's why I picked it. So I want you to show me that you've considered a few options before you come up with one, instead of just saying, yeah, I'm doing my sporting goods store by sport. End of argument. All right? I want to see that you've considered other options and you've documented that. And then your final result will be like an organizational chart. Now, if you can do that in Word, great. If you can't, scan it in, draw it on a sheet of paper and scan it in. I think there's a scanner in lab. Take a picture of it with your cell phone. Bring it to me. I'll take a picture of it with my cell phone. I'm not interested in like museum quality documents that I could hang on my refrigerator because they're such beautifully drawn diagrams. I'm more interested in the thought behind it and that you're communicating that thought of how you're going to proceed with this. Okay, we'll have 2 more steps, and these steps go by very quickly. There is the skeleton phase, all right, where you decide a basic layout for each individual page. And then finally, there's the surface layer where you actually start developing a prototype. Those we will start next time, and those will go very quickly. I imagine both of those together will wrap up in a half hour or so. So please, it's not too early to start working on the design for your project. So start looking in those terms. Bring questions you have to class, and we'll wrap up the design on Tuesday. All right, we'll see you over in lab.